Welcome YouTube to Narrative Crusades, the channel dedicated to bringing a grand narrative campaign to your gaming group. Today, we look at start collecting Drukhari, easily the nastiest bad guys of the 40k universe. Part 2 of the campaign is live and in our Discord area or Linktree. Anyone can get involved. It's free, links are in the description. Thanks to the continued support of our Patreons, we will be giving away a further 3 combat patrols, or the equivalent, we have been delivering internationally, onto the lovely, cuddly Drukhari. Lore-wise, the Drukhari are a faction of the Eldari, an ancient and highly advanced alien race. They are also known as the Dark Eldar because they are corrupted by their extreme cruelty. They live in a hidden city called Cormorra, which is located in the Webway, a network of tunnels that connects different parts of the galaxy without the use of the warp. The Drukhari are constantly raiding other worlds to capture slaves, resources and souls. They feed on the pain and suffering of others because it is the only way they can avoid being devoured by Slaanesh. The Drukhari are divided into 3 main groups: the Cabals, Cults and Covens. The Cabals are the military and political factions led by ruthless Archons. The Cults are the gladiatorial arenas where the witches fight for fame and glory. The Covens are the laboratories of the homunculi, experimenting with flesh and pain. They are fully fleshed out groups and can be mixed on the table or used individually. The Drukhari also employ various mercenaries and allies, such as mandrakes, scourges, incubi and more. The Drukhari use fast and agile vehicles such as raiders and venoms to transport their warriors into battle. They hit fast, hit hard, and then tend to vanish. In the lore, this is because they are swift and nimble. On your tables, it's because they're made of tissue paper. Also, quick question. Are the Tower worth consuming? They don't really have souls, although demons do possess them. 40k ponderings. Community, thoughts please. On to Collector and Drukhari. They have a lot of positives. There are 3 clear sub-factions within the army, that of the Cabalites, Witches and Homunculi, each of which has a leaning towards a different theme and feel to them. These are unique and allow a strong theme to be put into any army. Want to just use Cabalites with a few supporting units? That works. Want to go for a full witch cult? Perfectly doable. The army has a very good set of plastic models. These are very unique. They have a strong feel, have been well supported since at least 8th edition, and each of the models has a different feel. Sneaky mandrakes, shooty scourge and zippy venoms to name but a few. There is, however, a downside. While the range is entirely plastic, this is because there are a number of models you can't buy anymore. Not only that, they've not been available for a good while now. Unusually, they're still represented in the index cards. Normally, discontinued models are not represented, grotesques being the main culprit, but this can also be expanded further into units such as mandrakes and some of the fiend units. This is particularly bad because some of the units, such as mandrakes, are key to the Drukhari playstyle. They're fairly unique in the faction, with not much play around in terms of a substitute. They're fantastic, and you can't buy them. Grotesques are also huge. I would argue this is a larger issue because if you're playing a Coven, you need grotesques, and once again, you can't buy them, and that's been going back 3 or 4 years now. All armies, particularly themed armies, are susceptible to rules change, but perhaps Drukhari suffer a little more than most. You may sometimes find that your witches armies go from being king of the world to suddenly dying horribly, while Cabalites, who are not so strong in 9th, suddenly seem to be hurting units. If you go for a strong theme with Drukhari, you just need to consider the fact that you're perhaps a little more at risk to rules change. On to collecting. An easy way to start collecting Drukhari is with 2 combat patrols. That nets us 20 warriors, 2 Archons, 2 raiders, 2 ravagers and 10 incubi. This is a very flexible force. There is justification for every unit here in nearly any list. Cabalite warriors are flexible objective holders. They can even be split into 5-man squads on the table. Great cheap trade units, kicking out a bit of damage now as well. Raiders are going to be pivotal in almost any Drukhari list. They are fantastic transports with one of the best anti-tank guns in the game. Ravagers are Dark Lance death machines. Incubi are good, and Scourge are damage dealing monsters that can shoot and scoop. Build options are also fairly simple, except for the Scourge. Once the Tyranid Codex is out, we will know the future of Scourge. At the moment, points wise, 4 Dark Lances for the price of the squad is absolute madness, though they're difficult to get hold of 4 Dark Lances because the kit doesn't come with 4. It is possible to magnetize them because the weapons are varied, but they're very fiddly. Everything on here, however, other than the Scourge, could appear in almost any list, practically forever. This list gives us all the hallmarks of a Drukhari list: mobile infantry units, everyone is on a transport due to the venom for the incubi. This really adds survivability to the basic Kabalite, who are okay for the first time since I was a kid. I actually killed a model with their guns this edition. Not only that, but a power from pain token on the raider affects the whole squad. That's 2 dark lances and possibly 18 other shots, all re-rolling their hits. Incubi and a venom offers some fairly modest, quick, close combat punch and perhaps counterplay, and the Ravagers can take down Terminators and tanks with ease. The Scourge will kill whatever you point them at. Worth noting, this is actually a 1,150 points. We're not using 5 of the Incubi and an Archon in the list. For £45 more than Custodes, it's not that bad. eBay wise, I don't think we're going to be saving that much. You might be able to pick up a Venom, but everything else is in the Combat Patrol. Those are pretty good value for money. What's an alternative 1,000 point starting place? If we wanted to go down the Coven route, the Combat Patrol is still a good option. Magnetise the Raider so that the guns can be taken off, and now you can have 2 Raiders. Use the Raiders in this list. This time we've added a Homunculi with 10 racks and 4 Talos plus a Kronos. This is quite a hard hitting 1,000 points. 5 monsters is fairly nasty. It does go up to £350, but you will be able to save a lot by fishing for Talos on eBay. They're a great sculpt, they've stood the test of time, they still look creepy as hell. There are a lot of weapon options. I can see that yo-yo in a little bit. Just have a consider of that when you're putting the model together. I have 6 in my pile of shame, and they're my 10th edition painting goals. These things are creepy. On the table, this list has a reasonable mobile firepower from the Kabalites and Raiders, but a lot more toughness and close combat viability than the previous list. It's probably not as good considering range firepower is necessitated in 10th. However, at 1,000 points, 4 Talos are going to cause problems for a lot of people. In terms of a witch cult, at the moment, I couldn't recommend that, so I'm not going to put a list together for that. They're a little bit weak at the moment, unfortunately. How do we expand past our initial 1,000 points? It's really difficult to give solid advice on this. There's no big model, there's no character worth writing home about that you must buy, and there's going to be no solid 400 point brick that Drukhari have. Therefore, we need to consider pretty much what you want. Drukhari are pirates, their theme is fairly universal. Most of the units do well as small entities and can be justified in any army. They play the game really well. Reavers are probably a good starting point because they zip around scoring points for behind enemy lines or deploy teleport homers, and it can also cause some real issues for backline units. 2 units to 3 is a solid choice. Another Incubi in a Venom is not going to hurt you too much either, especially if you didn't use the Incubi and you bought the first list. Now's a good time to consider leaning into a theme. The good news is we know we're going to get support with our themes. Looking at the Tyranids, they have 6 detachments and all the different flavours you can consider around those and some new ones. So I think it's fair to expect Drukhari to get similar treatment. It's highly likely that looking ahead we'll be given options for Kabalites, cults and Covens. So if you want to have a little bit of a theme, you can lean that way. The truth is that adding 1 unit at a time to this army is a really good idea, unless you fancy buying 3 Void Ravens, but then you probably deserve it if that goes wrong. Witches are perhaps a little bit poor at the moment. Leaning into this is probably going to be playing Drukhari on hard mode. You pay a premium for fight first. I don't think my witches have ever survived a round of shooting to get charged. Perhaps I am up against a little bit more flamer wielding nut jobs than most of you. I am getting overwatched a lot. In terms of my own collecting experience, I found the model range is really good. With each unit being fairly unique in terms of what it brings to the table, I've added to it fairly slowly. The first 2,000 points was a solid gladiator army. The above is an example of a 2,000 point which is adjusted for 10th. There's only 20 witches in this one instead of 40. No spoilers, there might be some Overwatch in the upcoming battle report. Kits wise, no complaints or concerns. They're a little bit sprightly, they're quite skinny. I hope the range doesn't go to 28.5mm bases in the long term, that'll upset me a little bit. But the kits are all doable. I have some Raiders kicking around from 4th, and I think they would still fit into the army today. A great faction I've had a lot of fun with. I think because they don't have a brick unit to rely on, they feel very different on the table. A lot of the time, for example, with Chaos Space Marines, you might be taking 10 Terminators, or with Space Marines, you might take 10 Desolation Marines, and you're expecting them to really put some volume out for you. Whereas when you look at a Drukhari list, you don't really expect it to do anything except kill something and then die. I have found a complaint. No centerpiece model. We need one. After all, we have a throne to finish. I hope you get the reference. In terms of painting and support on YouTube and other places, I actually found Drukhari to be one of the least supported factions. So Citadel paint schemes all the way. I've actually steered away from the traditional Dark Eldar colours, which is black, and then adding colour only towards the edge. It is achievable, but I would say it's quite a challenge. If you have a look at the models I've painted there, I've got my Cabalite Warriors and my Trueborn, and then what I've done is I've stuck to a theme across the entire army, and that theme is blue with a little bit of bone. Equally, you can still find some older guides if you're going into painting skin for racks. I found this 8-year-old video, it's still excellent. Any kind of pale skin or vampire skin can be a good search string to look for. Also, just painting any kind of ceramic in terms of your colour scheme, and then applying that across your model in the usual way that you would do. In terms of painting vehicles, this was the first time I really tried to use dry brushing and stippling. I used this vehicle guide from Artis Opus. It's the first vehicle I ever tried this on. It really converted me to the approach. You can really reduce the painting times on vehicles, and you can give them that little bit of an airbrush feel. I think you can see mine's a little bit chalky here. My advice to you straight away would be, don't go with your traditional methods of removing paint using tissue paper. You want a piece of wood, just like he does in his videos. Thanks for listening. If you wish to discuss where to start Drukhari or any other faction, pop over to the Discord or leave a comment below. There are a lot of friendly people in the Discord who will help you share their experiences. Finally, the campaign can be downloaded and played. We've expanded the reply form to include your specific battles so we can add that to the narrative. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, and leave a comment please. Thanks for listening.